The first time I ever saw a story of mine like printed on the page, it was a couple years ago in of course, horror and thriller themed collection. But it was the first story of mine that I'd ever not seen just on a computer screen. And that was the most surreal, coolest feeling. It was a literary magazine that like no one had ever heard of. I didn't get paid for it. Like, it was not rock star literary quality, but for me, it felt huge. And I think, success can look like different things to different people. And just for me, seeing my name on a printed page, that was like, oh, I did it.
What is your relationship like with the horror thriller genre?
Oh, I love it so much. I think it's so underrated. I think it was Theodore Sturgeon who said, 90% of like genre fiction is garbage, but 90% of everything is garbage. And I think a lot of people tend to get like bogged down and think that horror and thriller is cheap and splashy and goes for kind of like the easy scare for shock value. But I think horror can get to the core of a character in such a way that a lot of other genres cannot. And it's really not about being able to scare an audience, although that is an added perk, but being able to hold up a lens to society in a way that other genres wouldn't allow.
So you've recently published in a collection of fairy tales retold by people of color. Why did you decide to retell the story of Bluebeard?
I've always been interested in kind of like adapting and changing myths and stories. And I noticed, when there are minority-centered fairy tales, they're very specific to that culture. Kind of like Anansi is maybe the biggest one that everybody knows. But being able to take something that I feel like people have heard 1,000 times and being able to inject some new life into it was an interesting idea. And I think what the story talks about is going back to the idea of horror is an interesting and terrifying concept in the history of sort of like cultural appropriation that I was kind of like morbidly fascinated by.
How important is representation in your writing?
It is the most important thing. Everybody tends to say that, you write from your own experiences, which to a degree is true. But I also try to put myself in the shoes of other people often. And it goes back to the idea of me having something to say in each story, where a lot of the things that I think are important are based on experiences that these minority groups have. And part of it is working with the idea of something new. When people talk about kind of like the Western canon, it's like, all right, how many old, dead white dude stories are there left to tell? None, I think. So yeah, I definitely want to see something new.
You published in Writer's Digest while you were a PRWR student, and you've published many other stories since then. What is your secret to successful story submissions?
I think that when it comes to what's sort of like the secret to success is to don't write a story with the intention of, oh, I'm going to send it here or there and get it published. Just like work on the story itself and make sure that it is true to the characters, true to the message, true to you as the writer. And then after that, just like look for a genuinely good place that will take it. Submittable is, always there. Twitter has been huge to follow all the different literary magazines that are out there. You really get a sense of what everyone is looking for. And I think the biggest challenge is just getting over that initial fear of rejection. I remember back when I was sending out that story for Writer's Digest around that time, I would get rejections and it would just feel like soul crushing. But now, like, for example, I think in the last week, I've maybe gotten 5 different rejections. And I truly do not feel it anymore. All I feel is, okay, this wasn't the right place for that story. Time to send it somewhere else.
So what advice do you have for newer writers?
I would say whatever your goal is as a writer, to just like stick to it. Just find what is going to work for you. There's always some degree of imitation, but definitely don't try to be the next, Stephen King or whoever. Just be the first you and like write a story that is true to you. And it will certainly be scary to try to give that to someone else. But I think the most important thing is whatever your goals for writing are, if you are your favorite writer, then you can do whatever you set your mind to.